Dipper Lowydd, and forgive me, Deputy First Minister, I'm slightly nervous of framework bills giving powers to ministers to do things through secondary legislation. But putting that aside, firstly, I just wondered on why, with the OEP operating in both England and Northern Ireland, why did you wish to come up with your own OEGW, duplicating a lot of the costs when it comes to this, and ensuring that any new measures are both fair and workable for Welsh farmers? And concerns around how the bill might interact with the forthcoming sustainable farming scheme. There is a risk that it could serve as a backdoor to SFS-style obligations, even for those who choose not to take part in the SFS. So while the SFS is voluntary, this bill introduces legally binding biodiversity targets. The key question, therefore, is, will these targets apply to all land managers, regardless of whether they're part of the SFS or not? And finally, a precursor to this bill was the biodiversity deep dive. For transparency, can you outline how many of the organisations that took part in the deep dive currently receive Welsh Government funding? And given that over 80% of Wales is agricultural land, why were the farming unions excluded from that biodiversity deep dive? Of
all the contributions so far, this is the first one, Sam, to my surprise, that has picked up some scepticism of what we're trying to do and of the target setting. Yes, the targets will be binding. That's why we have biodiversity targets, so that they are binding. Sorry.
Can I have the conversation, indeed, please? Let the Deputy First Minister answer
Thank you, Deputy. For a long time, a wide range of stakeholders have called, in fact, we've heard it from your own benches, to get on with this and actually put those targets in place, put the environmental governance body in place. And yes, of course, it's binding. And it'll be all for members here throughout to agree whether this is the right way forward or not. But you also raised the issue of, along with that degree of scepticism, about the funding of those stakeholders who've previously been involved in the deep dive into biodiversity. I would simply say part of the reason that we've got to this place today, where we can actually bring forward really intelligent, well-designed biodiversity targets with the target advisory group, is because of the precursor to that, of the work that was done with those participants. Now, that was very, very important. So, I note the tone of your contribution, how much funding that they had and whatever. Well, clearly I wouldn't have that to hand, but by all means put in a question to me and so on. But it seems to suggest that this was not worth doing. I would argue to you it was very worth doing, Sam, because it's got us to this place today. You ask why a standalone body for Wales. Now, look, that's a really good question, we looked at alternatives. Could we take an existing body in Wales, such as NRW? Could we look at using one of the other bodies? As I mentioned in my opening remarks, however, there is a unique policy context here in Wales. We're the only nation with the Wellbeing of Future Generations legislation. We have a specific approach in terms of, for example, river quality through the river summits and so on. There are a range of reasons why we need a standalone body here in Wales. Secondly, NRW or another organisation to have that mark in its own homework in terms of not environmental regulation and enforcement, but actually marking its own homework then in how it's helping drive towards biodiversity restoration targets and so on. All of the stakeholder engagement, Sam, which I'm sure you'll have read, and the consultation responses showed that there was a need for a body in Wales that had independence. The point that's been raised already, that could stand alone, had clear independence, had oversight across public bodies and Welsh ministers as well. Now, I'm the sponsor and minister for NRW. How does NRW then hold me to account? This body has the ability actually to point the finger at public bodies, including Welsh Government as well. It is a Welsh version of what is happening in Scotland, Ireland, and so on. So hopefully that will meet with the support of members here. So, sorry, there were other aspects you mentioned, but I hope you will support this going forward whilst we explore some of these issues. But I think this is absolutely the right approach to have an environmental governance body that can have oversight right across the whole public bodies, setting targets in place and having those principles enshrined within legislation.